The Creative Psychotherapist is the official podcast of the Creative Clinicians Corner, a practice-building resource for creative psychotherapists. TCP Podcast is the cast for creative, expressive, and experiential-focused psychotherapists curious to learn how to design, build, and scale a thriving private practice. Your host, Raina Lombardi, interviews successful therapists about the tools and strategies they have used to develop creative-focused practices. They also talk about the products, services, and side hustles they have developed using their knowledge and creativity to enhance their therapy practices, make a greater impact in their communities, and diversify their income streams. Welcome. Now here's your host, Raina Lombardi.
Hey creatives, thanks so much for listening to the Creative Psychotherapist podcast. I'm your host, Raina Lombardi, and I am thrilled to have my next guest on the show. Her name is Jenny Boyd, and she is an award-winning marketing and graphic design professional with well over 13 years experience providing effective leadership in creating creative solutions for corporations, nonprofit, and small businesses. She's the owner of Jenny Be Creative, and she creates impactful graphic designs which help small business brands stand out and shine. Prior to opening her business, she worked in both the corporate side of graphic design, marketing, and as an educator. Welcome, Jenny. I'm so grateful that you're making the time to speak with me today.
Yes, hello. I'm glad to be here.
Tell us a little bit about what your experience is as a graphic designer and some of the work that you've done over the years.
Oh, that's a hard question. Starting out
Just
with a hard one.
Just a little bit about yourself.
Well, I started out as a fine art artist, and love making art and expressing myself, and it's actually kind of more of a need for me than just I wanna. I relish in the problem solving required to create anything, right? And so in the art world, I've always been, gallery shows and stuff like that, but I needed more. I needed to create even more. And so I discovered graphic design, and it kind of opened up a new aspect of design for me, and in a different way, because art is communication, and so is marketing. And so I just found a new way to communicate and to make it effective, and I find that exciting.
Yeah, I think too, like when you're making art for yourself, right? And this, is my take on it. Really, it becomes about you, the artist, and what you're communicating to the world, right? I mean, hopefully, maybe you're helping others because they're relating to that and they're finding validation in the work that you create, or they're finding a sense of beauty or peace or something that the takeaway. But when you're creating as the graphic designer, you're really helping somebody else to be able to communicate to the world, hey, like, here's what I'm doing, here's how I can help you, here's what I have to offer. So it's a different kind of way of communicating.
It is, and I enjoy helping people, find their voice. And especially in small businesses and businesses that are establishing or trying to truly find themselves, they, once they find their voice, you see a happiness and, a success that comes with that might not have been there before because they just didn't know what to do,
Right. In so many ways, like the work that we do is quite similar.
Yes. It is.
Right. So what would you say if somebody is, going to branch out and start off and kind of go into business, how do they find their voice in terms of a design, a brand, to let the world know that, hey, here's what I'm doing over here. You should come take a look.
Well, I think the first thing to understand is branding. It is so much more than just a logo.
Mm.
Everybody thinks your brand is your logo. That is one aspect. There's actually 8 different aspects. There is your logo, obviously, and it's by itself because you can put it on things by yourself, and it is a mark that represents you. There's your visuals, that's your brochure, that's your social media, that's your website, everything that can be visually seen that represents you as a brand.
Okay.
And then we get more into the, your products, obviously, your customer service, your employees, if you have any. Most small businesses don't, right? But but once you branch out, that needs to be remembered. And then your expectations or your customers' expectations, and that leads to your reputation. And all of those aspects kind of mold and build into what is truly your brand. And they all play off each other and they all work together, because if they aren't working together, you need to address that because they need to be cohesive.
That's incredible. I never really considered those other aspects of branding, like the customer service piece. It makes sense. And I think maybe I understood it kind of on an unconscious level, but not on a conscious level.
Yeah, and I personally think it is very, very important to make sure that you are conscientious of that, because that when you're setting your expectations for, you set your office hours. That gives an expectation. Customers can get a hold of you from this point to this point. Your telephone number, the way you answer your phone. Do you answer it with your business name included? That way there's an immediate reassurance to your potential customer that, hey, they got the right place, right?
Yeah.
And so all of these are your actions, how you respond to somebody that's upset, or how you set up your website for ease of use, how, all these things play a role. And it really does play a big, part of your brand. And
Yeah, I think especially as we get more like technologically savvy, if you will, it is really important to have a website that is easy to use and people are able to find the information that they need very quickly and intuitively. The more barriers that people have to finding the information, the quicker they're going to bounce and go look somewhere else. We live in like this kind of need
exactly.
for immediacy society. So that really
You
is
have
important.
10 seconds, both and that 10 seconds, it's amazing. And I've seen it grow, because it first started, you have 10 seconds to convince somebody to read your postcard, right? And then social media and stuff like that, you have 10 seconds to catch their eye while they're scrolling through their feed. You have 10 seconds to stick out from your Google search when you're searching for it's an immediacy that is necessary. So things like blogs and stuff, those are great because somebody goes into your blog to read something extensive. But on your website, you need to keep it simple and to the point and have clickables that give them more information. So it's all the way you design it, way eye flows, all of these things are an art. And so it needs to be put together, the best way possible for your brand avatar. And I just kind of blopped a new marketing term on you.
Florida Art Therapy Services is a proud sponsor of the TCP podcast. They offer art therapy for individuals and groups, as well as qualified supervision services and high-quality, experiential-driven continuing education for art therapists, mental health counselors, and clinical social workers. Visit www.floridaarttherapyservices.com for more information. And if you're interested in becoming a sponsor of the Creative Psychotherapist podcast, we have copper, silver, and gold options. So visit www.creativeclinicianscorner.com/podcast for more information.
There's a couple of terms that I want to explore with you if you're willing.
Okay. Yeah.
The first would be eye flows. Can you kind of explain a little bit about what that is and how that affects the user experience?
Just like in fine art, your eye goes to the main focal point and then it flows naturally. If you do not have that natural flow, they're going to stop right where they started and move on. So it is important that you have your eye catcher. Usually it's your headline or a nice image or something like that. And then it flows, it entices you to move forward. Without that, like I said, you just kind of stop and you're like, okay, next.
Right. So that they get stuck in one place and they don't move around the website. So there needs to be some flow.
Correct. And there are some blind spots in your website that naturally come up. Your lower right hand side of your website, that's kind of a blind spot.
Interesting. What makes that
I don't
part
know
the
why.
blind spot?
I'm not sure. Maybe I need to get some sort of psychology degree to be able to research that and figure it out. But yes, and it's the same on most visuals. Your lower right hand side is kind of your blind spot. That's why, like on a postcard, that's why your address area is always there. Not only the post office kind of picked up on that. Thank you, post office. But they don't put your logo over there on the bottom right. Just don't do it.
Okay.
Unless your visuals are pointing straight to it. There are ways around it.
Wow, I never knew that. That is a really great tip. I definitely have found myself putting my logo on like media, marketing media in that section. Is there a preferred location?
It depends on what it is and what your intentions are. And there are, of course, like I mentioned before, there are ways around it. If your imagery and your wording are pointing to it, you're good. But but there needs to be essentially a visual arrow to it.
Okay. All right. So it needs to be really pointed out and directing the eyeballs over to that space on the paper or screen or whatever. Okay.
Exactly.
And then the other term that you had used was, I want to say, your user avatar.
User avatar. Okay, so this is actually a mildly new trend in marketing and advertising. So with technology being what it is, and we're learning so much more about the human and how we act and interact with marketing materials. Your avatar is your ideal customer. It is their age, it is where they live, their income, every aspect of the human being. You create your marketing around that avatar for the most bang for your buck.
So really considering their entire kind of demographic information.
Correct. And make that ideal customer. And then, point all of your marketing materials to attract that customer. I see time and time again where, their clientele are older and they're doing something that a younger person would like. So that's contracting, that's not right.
I see.
So we need to make sure that our visuals and our communication, the way we speak, everything goes towards that avatar.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, living in Florida, obviously our population is predominantly older folks. And so if we are serving that population, then our messaging and our images that we're selecting for our website and stuff need to match that. Mine is very vibrant and definitely has a younger vibe to it. But that's not my population, but I would not have considered that need to switch that imagery to meet their needs and give them something that they more relate to. But it makes a lot of sense.
Absolutely. So even down to the fonts you choose and every aspect of it, the words you use, slang words that you would use for a young person, you would use for an older person. You just got to make sure you're doing it for your ideal client.
Yeah, and a lot of the research that I've done, people talk about really gathering the language, gathering quotes from your ideal client, and then pulling exactly from what they're telling you and using their language.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Speak to them, because if they feel like you are speaking their language, they're more, it's human nature, and they're going to be more attracted to your business.
Sure. Well, they're like, oh, I hear myself right there. I see myself right there.
Exactly.
It clicks. So when people are thinking about developing a set of visuals, their logo, the font that they're using, where should people start in terms of considering that stuff? It seems like there's a lot that goes into it, a lot of metaphor and understanding of the imagery and the power of color and all of that good stuff.
Absolutely. So first, you need to know your industry, know your competition, make sure that your visuals are, hopefully a step above your competition, but not speaking a completely different language. So you find out, what they're doing, and then come up with yours. Colors, as you probably very well know, are associated with different emotions. They create different emotions within people. So it's important that when you're thinking of your brand and your avatar, how do you want them to feel about you? And those colors need to reflect that. Font-wise, it's a little more complicated. Legibility is a huge friend.
Yeah.
As artists, we like the, artistic flair, but if it's not serving its job, we need to be aware of that and do something about that. And, it's just kind of commingling those crazy things, all these things. It's a big head idea that you have to squish into your visuals and how you communicate. And
Yeah. Well, when you think about it, I I've heard and read that, it takes 7 times of seeing something before you become familiar with it, or hearing something before you become familiar with it, before it really kind of sets in your psyche, and then
Hmm.
you're like, oh yeah, that's there. And a lot of that has to do with how your really logo is speaking and standing out. Yeah.
Branding is an emotional response. Think of your favorite, thing, your favorite company. And the emotional response, like Starbucks. I'm like, I need a Starbucks right now, you know? And that emotional response in which you receive by just seeing that logo.
Mm, right.
And the bigger companies, they develop their own speak. I don't buy a large coffee at Starbucks, do I?
No, that's so
No,
true.
you don't. And so they create their own language and their emotional attachment through that language, as well as their visuals. You go around the world, and consistency. And that's another big thing about branding, is that it is so important to be consistent.
Hmm.
Um, because you're going to break that emotional response if you're not consistent throughout, and you got to keep it up.
Gotcha. Wow. Yeah. So the consistency, that's going to apply to the way you describe things, the colors, the fonts, all of those things.
All the visual aspects, including your customer service, your products, everything needs to stay consistent. So that way they can build that positive emotional response to your brand.
I gotcha. I gotcha. So if somebody has never been in business for themselves, right? It's their first kind of step going out on their own, and they know, okay, I know I need to get a logo. I know I need to, develop some visuals. I know I need to develop a website and pamphlets or trifolds, all of those things, business cards. What are some questions that they may need to ask um, the graphic designer? Like when I first started, I just kind of went to the print shop, and not to, say anything against the print shop. They were very helpful. But what should people be asking about this person that they're potentially asking to create this very important, lasting impression for their company?
Absolutely. You're essentially hiring somebody to create your brand. It is imperative that you find the right fit for you.
Mhm.
Um, Everybody, has, and this is the graphic designer's brand as well, right? So they should be able to convey to you the steps necessary to go through the process. I always, especially, I can give an example. A soap company came to me couple months ago, and they're they weren't sure about their name. And
Mm.
so I Googled it, and I knew they didn't have any market, but that's the first thing you do. You go to where the people go, right?
Mhm.
I Googled it. I also looked if their business name was taken and their domain name is taken. I did all those things for them, and I'm like, okay, guys, this isn't going to work for you, and this is why.
Mhm.
And so I pointed out that you know Google tried to autocorrect their name title. So I'm like, that's not going to fly because you're not going to show up.
Yeah.
And, and it was a very long name,
Mm-hmm.
just that 10 seconds, I
Mm-hmm.
gotta keep it going. And so I pointed out to them, and then that gave them an understanding that I truly understand brand, and they're in a good place with me.
Mm-hmm.
And so when they did come up with a name, and I worked with them, I have a series of questions I asked to try to get out, because in the creative world, you're working from absolutely everything, and you're trying to narrow it down to a specific thing that
Yeah.
has an emotional attachment to them more than anybody else, because this is their baby, right?
Right.
And so you ask them the questions, and you narrow it down, and then you work with them to try to get them their best visuals and their best um, start, because first impressions are everything, right?
Yeah.
So if you come out of the gate rocking it, you already are ahead.
That's so true. So really kind of inquiring whether or not that designer is going to take the time to really guide you through the process and help you to understand potential pitfalls that you may already be in as you're
Yeah.
thinking about the stuff. I know I think about that too in terms of like, how do you stand out as therapists? I there's a beautiful name for a practice, Thrive Counseling. But if you look, there's probably a Thrive Counseling in every community, in every state, and how confusing that would be if you don't have the right SEO in your website, and you're not coming to
Yeah.
the top page of Google in your community, and then your client can't find you because the name, even though it is a beautiful name and the meaning behind it really connects with what we want to do as therapists. We want to help people thrive. Because that name is so oft used, you kind of get mixed up. It, like, how do you stand out amongst everybody
How
else
do you?
who's,
Yes,
you know?
absolutely. You would have to you would have to hope your client is searching your specific region or saying near me, and cross your fingers. And so that is a problem. And I encourage, while you're thinking about what to name yourself, um, to Google your ideas and see what comes up, because you might realize that, that's a big tick in the negative, so we need to rethink this. Check your domains, check your social media uh,
Mhm.
domains, see if they're available. Everything should match. If they
Right.
can't search the same on all of your social media, maybe need to rethink.
That's a really great tip. So it makes it easy when all of the ats are the same at.
Yes, it's that ease of use again. you
Hmm.
know it's all about that 10 seconds and really kind of sticking out in the crowd.
Yeah.
So, because there are more than one therapist out there. Sorry. And then there's
Yeah.
and there's more than one graphic designer out there. They're not all the same. But, and just like in any business, finding the right one for you is so important.
I agree. I agree. It is. Having somebody that really has your best interests at heart, wants to see you succeed, wants to empower you to grow in your business. I think for me, those are what I look for in the other businesses that I've used to
Yeah.
help me along the way. And that been more, most helpful. Because they see like, well, your success is my success, right? My success is your success.
Yeah.
more collaborative in that way.
Absolutely. My slogan is your friend in graphic design, because I truly do believe everybody should have a graphic design friend. and 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 the relationship of a friendship is so much stronger than a client relationship, and I truly do befriend all of my clients, and I'm honest with them. I'm like, okay, here's what I can do for you. I would love to help you. Please be mindful of this.
Mm.
And because especially when you're starting out and somebody needs to be honest with you.
Yeah.
They don't have to be mean, but honesty is best.
Right. Well, it certainly would save you a lot of money and time in the long run when you have somebody that's really honest about what you're doing and saying, this could be a potential problem for you, and here's why. It's not that I don't like what you've come up with, but here are the reasons why it's going to add some extra challenges for you as you try to grow your business. I would
Absolutely.
much prefer somebody to be honest in that way than somebody to just be like, oh yeah, it's great. Let's do it. I'll print whatever you want on whatever you want.
Yes, and it's important, because the graphic designer, the branding, they're your advocate. They're the professional that knows, you your your business is something else, and you're going to the professional, and it is their job to show what they know and to be able to help you in the right direction and
Mm-hmm.
not cause problems for you in the future.
Yeah. What would you say to somebody who is like, well, I just want to get started, so I just want to pick this so I can get going, and then later on down the road, I'll change everything up? Because I've heard people say that before, which then like that raises a little bit of like fear for me for them. But what would you say as somebody who specializes in helping people kind of create their brand and make their mark?
Yes, absolutely. So brands need to evolve, not reinvent.
Hmm.
So when you're starting out and all your visuals are one way, and then one day you decided, okay, I need to rebrand. That rebrand needs to be an evolution, not a recreation. Because what happens is all of that work and all of that foundation you put on is broken. So no longer can you visually get that emotional response anymore, because your visuals are completely different. So it needs to be an evolution. So slowly over time, you build to what your dream is instead of just a complete recreate.
That's great. Yeah, that makes sense. I think we see that too in like big corporate rebranding, how it is very subtle, but you can still see the continuity flowing through there.
Yeah, McDonald's changes their logo every 3 to 5 years. Can you tell?
No,
No.
no, I would not have known
But
that.
but if you think about it, is the McDonald's of your childhood the red roof, yellow little stripes, Happy Meal of your childhood, the little benches that were hamburglers and whatever, to the McDonald's of today? Are they the same?
Not at all. Not
Not
at
at
all.
all. It is a slow but steady evolution. And it is important to keep your brand fresh and up to date. Um, yes, there are trends. Trends are lovely. Some of them stick, some of them do not. So be conscientious of the trends, but don't drop everything just to be trendy.
Sure. Yeah, I think you see a lot of certain types of small businesses that pop up around a trend, but they don't last very long because the trend fizzles out. And so
Yeah.
that's it. Bye-bye.
Well, you must evolve. and
Mhm.
your branding is part of it. As technology changes, as the way we communicate changes, you also have to change the way you're doing business. It's all encompassing. Branding is all
Yeah.
encompassing.
And
So,
I think we're seeing a little bit of this right now in response to everything that's happened this year with the stay-at-home orders, and a lot of therapists have um, switched to offering telehealth. And I'm hearing a lot
mhm,
of them say, I'm not going to reopen my brick and mortar practice. I'm going to completely move to that model, which they hadn't been doing before. So it is interesting, how certain, uh, cultural aspects, things that are happening in our environment, and how that influences the evolution and change of the
absolutely.
business.
Changing it, we abruptly had to change the way we live. And that has to also speak to what we're doing. You have to
Yeah.
evolve to thrive. So,
Yeah, that is true. Can't stay the same. Um,
yep,
or we get stuck, right? We kind of have to keep moving forward, stay in balance. So
yep.
very cool. Um, what would you say one should be looking for, maybe some inspiration or ideas of how to start thinking about the logo or image that would match their brand for their business? Do you have any recommendations for that?
Um, Being the visual person I am, I have a Pinterest problem. and 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 depending on the client and the way they communicate, because everybody's different, right? Not everybody's visual. I have several clients that I'm like, make me a Pinterest folder and share it with me,
Mm,
and that actually helps narrow down the wide world of my brain to what they're thinking, because knowing what they're thinking can also, and then I can have an intelligent conversation with them. Okay, these the images, the soft earth tones, read this to customers. The fine lines of the logos that you liked will be a challenge when you print it on this or whatever it may be. So
oh,
knowing what the logo's going on and how it will be used is important, and it also just opens a dialogue. Some people, it's more of a bigger brand situation. Like, I like Monster energy drinks. See, I'm wearing the shirt and I have the hat, you know. And that kind of gives you clues as well to where their mindset is visually, what they like. Um,
mhm,
because at the end of the day, it is their brand, and it's part of their personal story too. So
right.
and it's just opening a dialogue and knowing what kind of clientele you're working with. Obviously, knowing you're creative, I would probably, chit chat and go on Pinterest, and I'm like, make me a board, girl. And but somebody, that's more technical, like accountants have a tendency to more technical in numbers, and they're not, in the creative, you know mindset all the time. So, that muscle is not exercised as much. So
Sure.
you have to speak to them in their language.
Mm, yeah, that's so true. And I mean, that's what we're trying to do too, is really connect with people where they're at, and help them to grow. And similarly with this concept, we need to know what their language is. We need to understand what our language and our aesthetics are, and how those two really kind of bridge the gap. Um,
Exactly. So how does your brand read to your avatar, right?
mhm,
Who is your ideal customer? Does what you visually find appealing, is it the same?
mhm.
And where can you find that happy medium? Because there is a happy medium.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's also the piece of understanding when is too much. What's too much?
Too much.
Too
Yes.
much.
And I see that a lot when somebody's like making what should be a simple couple page brochure and it turns out to be a booklet. And I'm like, okay, guys, I would love to
Hmm.
make you a booklet, but it's not going to serve the purpose you are wanting.
Mm. So what would be like if you were creating a pamphlet versus a booklet, what would the pamphlet be used for versus the booklet be used for?
The booklet needs to be more in-depth information. It's just like reading a book, right? So you need to have, you know, and the pamphlet's more a general outline, um, teasers, if you will, of, what your services are or what have you. It could be a specific service, it could be an aspect, it could be, options are endless. But but the booklet needs to be more in-depth information, but it also needs to be presented in a way that would be read. That
Mm.
10-second rule still applies. And and if it's here's everything you need to know, have it easy to use, an index, just like a book, right?
Yeah, yeah. So thinking about that difference, like a pamphlet, it'd be more bullet pointed and simplified and easy to kind of digest at a glance, where the booklet allows you to dive in a little bit deeper to gain some more information. And
Exactly.
this is information I wish I would have known years ago when I was putting together my stuff. Because my pamphlet read like a booklet. It was terrible. I'll totally own it and admit it.
That's okay. You have a lot of information and to share, right? And you're
Hmm.
trying to get it out there. It's knowing, and it is a craft. It's knowing the craft of, visual communication.
Hmm. Yeah, which is helpful to work with somebody who understands that, and who's living there and really, doing that every day. Whereas we might be creative. I think I am creative. I have a background in art and studied art as an undergrad, and obviously have made a lot of art in my lifetime. But I don't make art for the purposes of marketing.
It
As
is, yeah. It's an ever evolving craft, and your professional needs to be up to date.
Yeah, that's such a great point too, right? If you're not up to date, you're not using the latest technology, which really allows to, I think, yeah, execute at a much higher level, like
Uh-huh.
quality level of what you're creating than the older technology forms out there. That's for sure.
Absolutely. It even goes down to like even things like your email address. It
Mm.
speaks to people. If your email address doesn't end in your website name, that that's part of your brand. If it ends in, you know, Gmail or AOL or something, that speaks to your customer, and that tells them that, there's a tech issue here, and
Mm.
that might be a flag, and we want to prevent those.
Oh, definitely, definitely. Having your domain name as your email name certainly helps with the memory of it. Um,
Absolutely. It's all that fine detail, and it is detailed. It's amazing how detailed it. And once it's established, it's actually not too horribly hard to maintain, as long as it
mhm,
is actually maintained. And that's important.
Can you speak a little bit about what goes into that, like the maintenance of all of this information that we're creating for the brand? How do you maintain it?
Sure. So, your website, just need to change your content every once in a while, move things. That means that it's been visited in a while. A big thing is at the bottom. Everybody needs to have their copyright mark at the bottom, copyright 2020, all right. In my case, Jenny B Creative, all rights reserved. That tells whoever's looking at the website that I've been on it in 2020. So, and actually in copyright situations, that means that you are still holding, if you have a date that's older, you're saying that this stuff, all my content on here is free for you to use. So,
wow.
So go on your website right now. And I picked that right now. So, it's little clues like that and little details. Change the pictures around, put customer reviews that are recent on there and have a date on there, because that tells people that are going on there that they're up to date. Your Google, everybody that owns a business needs a Google My Business.
Yes.
Set it up. You need to be able to be searchable on Google, Yahoo, and all the other ones as well. But Google obviously is the big guy right now. So let's make sure we have one of those. And, put posts on there. It's just like your social media. You need to put posts on there. You need to put pictures on there, events you're having, everything that shows that you're live, you're active, and your customers are happy. I just mentioned Google, they have your reviews. You are more likely to be clicked on if you have stars that are in the 4 to 5 range than none at all. Because what that tells them is like, there's no feedback.
Yeah.
So we don't know what we're going to get.
It gets tricky for therapists around the review piece because it's considered unethical for us to ask our clients to leave reviews and feedback. But we can ask fellow colleagues to do so, like colleagues that we collaborate with and refer to. We can definitely ask for that. So that goes a long way.
If you're, doing an event that actually is not part of your therapy itself, but just an event to introduce people, tell me what you think in a Google review, please. All of that stuff plays into it. And there's ways to get reviews without.
Right.
And ethics are immensely important in all businesses. And so it's important to stay within them and to be conscientious of them, of course.
Right. But I agree with you, Jenny, in that it's easy to get caught up in, well, this is the ethics. So I'm in a box and I can't move out of the box. So that's where we have to use our creative minds and come up with other ways of figuring out how to do that. And it is possible to do so and still remain ethically aligned. So
yes. Absolutely. Yeah. And the same for social media. That's where everybody communicates these days, especially now we're quarantined, right? That's where we're getting our social interactions. And I'm sure everybody's seen I need somebody to recommend a.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, absolutely.
And so, and I do this with my fellow business friends. I befriend them, and part of my brand is befriending them, and I recommend them because I've gotten to know them and I know they're a quality business, and I feel at ease recommending them. So
absolutely.
So it's all an emotional response, which is branding.
But I think you're making some really great points about you have to have online presence. I've met some people that are trying to they have a practice or they're trying to create a practice, but they don't actually have a website. They, they haven't engaged in social media and they don't understand those aspects, but it becomes very important in terms of that little Google bot that goes around searching for things, and they're looking to see the evidence that you're really a real business and not
Correct.
a scam. And so the more that you have that validates that also helps push you up the chain in terms of the search. And so all those things are really important. The Google My Business listing.
100% important. I literally had a client say, I need a website right away because I have a vendor that won't sell me something because I don't have a website.
Wow, that's incredible.
So that's true testament to having, it's important to be out there digitally these days.
If you think about it, 10, 20 years ago, we would validate the business by searching through the phone book listing. And who has a phone book anymore? I mean, that's like Tinder for your campfire or something. People don't use those anymore. They go to the internet, they search on the web to find that information. And if you're not there, then that brings up, that's an emotional response. If I look for a business and I can't find it, I immediately wonder, like, is this a scam? Is somebody trying to take advantage of me? Is this is it real?
Yeah, exactly. This is part of a brand's identity these days. You have to be digitally available in some way. Now, I see lots of small businesses have just a Facebook page, and they point their Google search to their Facebook page. It's, when you have no budget, didn't plan on having marketing on budget from the get-go, which I don't recommend, but that's just me knowing what I do. There are creative ways to be out there. There are.
Definitely. I didn't have, quote unquote, a marketing budget. It was very, very limited. And I remember kind of talking about what I was doing maybe 6 months after I launched, and somebody asked, well, what are you doing to market? And I was like, oh, I'm not really doing anything. But, now after being in business for a number of years and spending a lot of time trying to learn more about marketing, I realized, no, it was just minimal, right? I had the website. I made a point to create the social media pages and put all that information out there, but I wasn't advertising. And that was kind of the difference for me between marketing and advertising. I mean, in order to advertise, you need to be marketing, but you can market without advertising, I think is how I've kind of made sense of it.
Yeah. Well, from what I'm hearing is that you created your brand visually, digitally, and you were relying on word of mouth situations instead of a active live, ad campaign or anything that's going out there. You were hoping you were legitimizing your brand digitally when, after they say got your business card or what have you, met you in person, they're like, ooh, let me check this out. And you gave them something to check out.
Right. So, wow. So many great pieces of information that you shared with listeners today. And I really hope that they find value in it. I know I learned new things today that I hadn't learned before. And before we actually got on the call, the official recording, you had mentioned that you have created a resource for people a YouTube. Is it a channel that you're doing, or just
It
some
is.
recordings? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Part of my brand, Jenny Be Creative, I have a YouTube channel, and on there I've co-branded with a social media expert, and it's called Deep Thoughts on Marketing, and it varies on topics from branding to graphic design. I get really down deep. I tell you why you should never buy a logo on Fiverr. And they're just short, like 7-minute little segments, and we talk about a subject to get you started in the right direction. And
okay, so if people want to find that, how would they find it on YouTube?
Good question. I believe it is jennybecreative.com. Jenny Be Creative.
Okay. All right, because I want to put that in the show notes, and I definitely want to check it out too.
You can also find it on my social media. I post it once every Thursday on my social media, Jenny Be Creative. So, and it's B, the letter B, because I be.
All right. So we'll put that in the show notes. We'll put the link to the YouTube channel. We'll put the link to your social media and your website, in case people want to reach out to you. And yeah,
I would love to hear from you. I would love to help anybody ready to, take their brand to the next level.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I'm really grateful for your time today and sharing all this really wonderful information with people.
It was super fun. I super hope your listeners enjoyed my little tidbits, and I hope that helps them grow.
I hope so too. Thanks so much, Jenny.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Creative Psychotherapist. If you like what you heard, please rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. For show notes, downloads, and additional resources, head over to the website at www.creativeclinicianscorner.com.